Hi, it's Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football, and today we're going to talk some Washington Huskies, a pretty fun team to talk about coming into the season. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm the econometrician behind BetaRank, an advanced stat system for college football. It's built on data that's provided, from the same people that provide data to the College Football Playoff Committee. It's an advanced stat system, so we control for opponent, field position, and tempo. All the stats you see today are going to be controlling for at least for those, sometimes more, and I'll tell you what. I would say this is an advanced stats preview. If you come into this and you're looking for somebody to talk about like the deep nooks and crannies of a particular depth chart, or to focus, like somebody that knows the ins and outs of your particular local team, that person is called a beat writer, and you should find them. Like, find your local beat writer, and they'll be doing that preview. This is going to be from an advanced stats perspective, talking about what your team was, what the team was good at, what the team was not good at, what they need to improve on, coordinator changes, what they have returning, like the major stuff. I mean, I should say I too get excited about guys who might break out, but it's hard to predict. As your local beat writer could tell you, predicting who's actually going to break out, in a particular, who might have a hot spring, who then translates that to the fall, can be a bit difficult. But I'm excited to talk through. We are closing in on number 10 and running through our previews for the year, doing number 9, Washington, a team that made a dramatic turnaround under Kalen DeBoer in his first season. They were number 9 projected into this season. They were finished last season at number 13 overall. And that's a big improvement because they were at number 60 overall in 21. Pretty bad Power 5 football team in Jimmy Lake's last season. Look, this Washington team has a lot going for it. They're a very ever so slight favorite in the Pac-12. We have a couple Pac-12 teams coming up right behind them in the projections, including the team at number 10. And most of the very good teams in the Pac-12 are returning a quarterback for the next season. And everybody, I think out of the top teams, the top offensives last season, it's really only Oregon loses their offensive coordinator and has a new OC. And now I do like Oregon's offensive coordinator hire, but of course, anytime new faces, new places, mileage may vary. Washington has some real advantages, I think, coming into this season, but it's all going to depend, and we'll talk about this. It is all going to depend on the defense making a turnaround. They were an offense first, second, and last team last year. They had a very bad Power 5 defense. Some of that is personnel. They had better hope that they have the right personnel in place this season. Otherwise, they could potentially underachieve again. And look, the Pac-12 did not have very many good defenses last season. Oregon State was the real standout amongst a pretty middling bunch. Middling actually a pretty bad bunch of Pac-12 defenses. Washington doesn't necessarily have to produce a good defense, I think, to win the Pac-12 and to potentially have sort of a banner year. But they need to at least get, improvement off of where they finished last season, which is number 65 overall. Sort of rule of thumb that I like to use. I grade Power 5 teams on a 1 to 65, soon to be 1 to 69 scale, because there's more Power 5 teams. They have different resources than Group of 5 teams. It's a useful way to think about things. A top 25, a Power 5 team that grades out at number 25 overall is really grading out not as, as sort of a middle of the road Power 5 team ish, a little better than that, but not much. Whereas a Group of 5 team grading out at number 24 overall is pretty darn good for the Group of 5, and that's quite an accomplishment. All right. Washington sits at number 11. Sorry, I should give you the Kalen DeBoer. Washington sits at number 11 overall in coaching and development. They do a pretty good job considering how well they recruit and how much they return often in producing good players on the field and good college football play on the field. They are at number 23 in Bill Connolly's returning production coming into this season. And that's pretty evenly distributed, but importantly, a lot of it's on the offense, where they return a good chunk of their production from last season. They're at number 35 overall in their 2-year rolling recruiting. This one hurts. Like Washington absolutely has to pick it up in recruiting. I think if they're going to look, DeBoer's got some talented players that, they've certainly been able to tap the transfer portal, but they need to step it up in recruiting and start to get some better players in-house. Otherwise, you're going to rely on the full engine of coaching and development and roster building through returning production in order to keep things going. That's a tough road to hoe, and you're not going to win a playoff game doing that. So Washington certainly has to improve their overall recruiting ranking. And we'll see. I mean, of course, people will throw out like, look at where they are today. And then I don't care where anyone is in recruiting rankings in the summer. Neither should you. Like you full on should not. Like until the ink is on the paper, you don't care about, or at least until like right before signing day. Do not lose sleep over where your team is now. There's always time to turn it around. There's always time to get flips in the summer. They were at number 23 overall in special teams last season. That's something they could improve a little bit on. That's not a bad special teams ranking. But special teams is primarily place kicking. I know fans tend to really remember, the punt returns for touchdowns, either that they scored or that they gave up. Those are fairly rare events in college football. And not only that, but within college football as compared to pro football, kickers tend to be far more heterogeneous. A good kicker in college football counts for a lot because not everybody has a good kicker. It's not the NFL. So scoring points when you have the opportunity for field goals really matters when it comes to your special teams ranking. We're going to run through the offense and the defense and then the schedule. So let's go ahead and hop into that. All right. This offense was so much fun last season. Number 6, so Ryan Grubb is your offensive coordinator. They made a huge improvement over Jimmy Lake's last season as OC. Jimmy Lake, of course, famously hired John Donovan, who could not coach offense at all, and was kind of a jerk about it. Not Donovan, Lake. Lake was just kind of a jerk. I don't like just like that whole transition and him being Chris Peterson's handpicked guy. Just none of that looks good. Anyway, number 6 overall on offense last season, significant improvement under DeBoer. This is where DeBoer really made his chops as he was the offensive coordinator in Indiana. Of course, with Michael Penix, Indiana's offense was really fun that season. For DeBoer, then he went off to be the head coach at Fresno State. Did a terrific job there. Ryan Grubb's the offensive coordinator here. He's did an excellent job. Washington managed to keep him despite rumors that Alabama was circling and hoping to land him as their OC. They were number 3 overall at drive efficiency last season. That's excellent. They did a really good job maintaining drives, putting together long drives to put points on the board. This is a measure of both execution and play calling. This is a great number to have. It's one of the more important, metrics within Beta Rank out of the core 4 Beta Rank metrics. Just an excellent at drive efficiency last season. They were also a very explosive offense, number 8 overall here. They were very good at being able to put up big plays. If you watch this Washington offense, you saw a lot of that last season. They could absolutely light you up with big plays. And it's not a one or the other. This isn't a Phil Longo offense where they are purely explosive and not efficient. Like I said, like a very efficient offense overall too. Play efficiency number 6 overall. This is controlling for explosives as well as field position, opponent, tempo, your yards per play outside of explosives. They did a really good job generating this here. This is the least important of the core 4 Beta Rank metrics, it turns out. a number to keep an eye on ish. Certainly they could they could improve offensively in like of where they sit, but even if they just replicate the offense they had last season, they would still do a very good job. This, however, I do want to call out, as good as Washington's offense is, there's a fair gap. I mean, if you look at where their offense graded out versus where the top offense did last season, which was Georgia, there's a decent sized gap between them. In Georgia, they were roughly around 83% as effective as Georgia was at scoring points. That's not small. So even though like it looks like, hey, like it seems like a stepwise function when you look at this, right? Like, and you think like, oh, it's a stepwise function down. The ordinal rank gives this impression, of course, of like a linear transition. It's not, like the distance between 1 and 5 is often greater than the distance between 5 and 10 in college football and how the offenses grade out. Washington has some room still to improve offensively. Now you could argue, look, as we get down here to effective rush, that what Washington really needs to do is run the ball more effectively next season. That's not necessarily the case. Washington could just become more effective passing the ball and putting up more points there. But they certainly do have room to improve running the football from where they were last season. I don't know. I might lean on Michael Penix if I were them, and I expect that they will again. Penix, who really struggled in his, once, and there were a lot of people coming into last year that were not particularly high on Penix, and they sort of held the end of his Indiana career against him. Of course, DeBoer had moved on, and Penix fell off considerably, as well as having some injuries and some offensive line issues. The moral of the story is pay attention to who the offensive coordinator is. It matters. Anyway, Penix offensively last season was phenomenal. 63.5% completion percentage, 8.5 per. Those are very good numbers in modern college football. I mean, I would argue like 63%, sort of the Mendoza line and quarterback completion percentage rate. You need to be able to sustain drives, but Penix is also getting the ball down the field with an 8.4 per. Offensively, rushing the football last season, according to Football Outsiders, they had 2.89 line yards. That put them at 24 overall. I mean, some of this is that like Washington, when they were running the football, they are often catching the defense in unsuspecting that a run is coming. Washington, I think they threw the ball so effectively, they were able to set up the run pretty well. I mean, grading out at number 24 overall, you'd think that they ran the ball more, but some of it is that, the offense has choice, and they're able to set themselves up to run successfully. Here's a really remarkable number, and this is a tremendous reflection on Penix. Washington had a 0.9% sack rate last season. Less than 1%. That's good for number 1 overall. Now, some of that credit goes to the offensive line, but sack rate is really more of a quarterback stat. Penix did not take sacks. He's fairly mobile, but he also just got rid of the ball, made smart decisions. Just terrific job by Penix last season. I mean, yes, of course, tip your hat to the offensive line on this one, but Penix deserves the lion's share of the credit, as well as the receivers. I mean, for getting open too, and not leaving Penix out there hanging, and your offensive coordinator and head coach for drawing up, a fun offense where receivers get open. You flip over to the defensive side of the ball. That's not good. William Inge is your defensive coordinator. Defense was really Washington's calling card under Chris Peterson. They really only had a serviceable offense when Jonathan Smith was there. Really a defense first team under Chris Peterson, both under Kwiatkowski and then Lake as defensive coordinators. But the prior year, they really fell off, from where they had been. So even in 21, they had fallen off a bit, come back to earth off of what had been some of their much better defenses prior, which Washington often found themselves in like the top 2 or 3 in the country defensively, rarely outside of the top 5 or 6 in Peterson's tenure there. This past season, they fell off even further from number 25 overall to number 65. That hurts. Some of it is you just have personnel issues. The defense that Kwiatkowski and Lake were running, you're essentially running only 2 down linemen some of the time. You really need a space eater in there, like a Vita Vea or someone like that, in there to play 2 gap and really eat up guys. They didn't have that, and they didn't have the personnel to really switch off to, a new front terribly well last season, as well as they had a lot of turnover in the secondaries. We're going to get to down here a little bit. They're number 46 overall in drive efficiency compared to some of their other numbers. This is a decent number. Number 65 overall would grade out a very, very bad Power 5 defense. 46 is not particularly good at drive efficiency, finding ways to get off the field and not give up points. But it definitely is something that if you have an offense like Washington does that puts up a lot of points, like if you were going to pick one to be pretty good at, drive efficiency is a good one because you've got some field to play with. Explosive drives, again, like this isn't great, but compared to what some of the numbers we're going to get to, they did a decent job controlling big plays. Play efficiency, this is not great. I mean, it's the least important of the core 4 beta rank metrics, but being this bad against it doesn't help. Number 88 overall. They need to do better, not giving up, consistent yards per play outside of explosives. Negative drives, this is horrendous. 103 in negative drives, not enough 3 and outs, not enough turnovers, not enough causing bad things to happen to the offense. And it's funny because like if you looked at Washington's defense the prior year, their real big problem was they couldn't stop the run, right? And the pass defense was actually pretty good in 21. That flips, right? Like they were able to shore up the run defense, but the inexperienced guys that they had back there in the secondary really did not play out. They absolutely struggled to generate a pass rush. Washington finished at 113 in effective pass. You could throw all over the Huskies last season. I mean, if you're a Washington fan, you're hoping you don't just course correct back and it's not just like a seesaw. They really need to improve the pass defense. I do expect the run defense to largely hold up. And we just sort of talked about this. They created disruptive plays on 19% of plays last season. That was good for 109. Not causing enough problems for the offense. They allowed a 45% conversion on third down last season. That was good for 117 nationally. That really hurts. Now they do have a good amount coming back. They're at 29 in returning production, according to Bill Conley, coming into this next season. That's 73%. They're going to need to improve. I mean, this defense is going to be like, if Washington's going to reach their potential, this defense has to make a big leap and get down to around 30, at least be a middle of the road Power 5 defense, because the offense should really, really be good enough that that they'll be able to put up points. The defense just has to be bend but not break, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they need to not be a pushover next season, basically. On the schedule, Washington is playing 12 FBS games. So we don't need to add one, and they're projected at 10 wins with that, which is pretty solid. Now, this is not, if you're going through here, this is not the most onerous schedule, but Washington, man, do they sure get to sort of, it's sort of a tale of two schedules. They really get to break it in pretty easily to start out the season, and have plenty of time to get sharp before they face anybody actually good. They opened with Boise State, a team that I do think has potential to improve under Andy Avalos. Boise State needs to figure out the offense. I think they can beat their projection at 60. The Mountain West has been largely a little disappointing in the past couple seasons. Boise State sort of under the radar has piled up some wins in a bad Mountain West over the last couple of years. Then last year, of course, they were not able to even do that. They need to be able to really turn it around. Washington's going to be a significant favorite at home over Boise State. I think that's actually fair. These naive spreads are built off of years of college football data, but I do expect scoring to come down a little bit this season with the new rule changes. We may get one less possession per team per game. That could cut 3 points, ish off of team scores. This might be closer to 2 touchdowns for the Boise State game. Tulsa is a team that really has struggled quite a bit. Washington should be a significant favorite here. Don't turn the ball over 4 or 5 times and you should be fine. Now they do go to Michigan State, a team that was very, very lucky in 21 and came back to earth in a big way last season. The offense has really struggled for the Spartans. But it will be a test. I mean, look, Washington truly did some bend, but I mean, like they would have won the game anyway, but they did some bend, but not break versus the Spartans defensively last season against a not very good Michigan State offense. There is the potential Michigan State could be a little bit better. We're going to get at least some idea here of what Michigan or what Washington's defense looks like here, because they'll get to go against Power 5 competition. The defense for Michigan State, Scotty Hazelton's their DC. I do like him as a DC, but they haven't been as good as I was expecting. They might need to take a step forward. It'll be an interesting test, I think, again, of where we think the Washington offense is going to fall coming into this year. Cal's kind of an interesting team here, not projected terribly high. They've really struggled offensively the entirety of Justin Wilcox's tenure, and they've come back to earth a little bit defensively. Decent by Pac-12 standards, but not great overall. Cal finds them but you do get Jake Spadoval in as the offensive coordinator. Pretty good offensive coordinator when he's been the OC in the past. Definitely Wilcox's best offensive coordinator hire of his tenure. I'm interested to see where this shakes out. This might be closer to 14. Washington still should be a pretty significant favorite. Arizona is a team I think that has an opportunity to take a step forward coming into this year. Defensively, I have no faith in Johnny Nansen as a defensive coordinator. He's probably the worst defensive coordinator in all the Power 5, if not large sections of the Group of 5 as well. But offensively, Arizona could be better again than they were last season. I think they still have room to improve there. This could be potentially a shootout. Washington still should be a favorite. This one might be closer to 10 by the time that we get to it. I mean, Arizona's defense, even as bad at Johnny Nansen is at his job, Arizona's defense should take a little bit of a step forward from where they were last season, which was abysmal. Then we get to Oregon, and Oregon is a team that's got a new offensive coordinator in place. I do like the hire. Bo Nix is back, but Oregon was also a bit of an offense first last team, but not as good offensively as Washington was. Now their defense was a little bit better than Washington's was too. This should be a pretty interesting matchup. This might be closer to 3 points, with Washington at home. I do like the Huskies a little bit here, but again, it might come down to whomever turns the ball over. Moore is going to win this football game, he's going to lose the football game. You don't want to be sitting -1 on turnovers in this game. This one could be really tight. Arizona State is a team, of course, that now has Oregon's offensive coordinator as the head coach. And Bo Baldwin, of all people, is the offensive coordinator in place. I think Arizona State can be better than they were last season, but that's a pretty low bar because they were pretty bad last year. This is probably closer to 21 points, a game Washington should win. I mean, there is the saying amongst Washington fan about the desert dogs often struggling when they go down. If they're going to get desert dog this year, it's going to be when they're in Tucson because they get Arizona State at home. Stanford is a team that I like Troy Taylor as a coach in the FCS. I think he did a pretty good job there with Sacramento State. He and his staff should be an improvement over what David Shaw was doing at the end of his tenure at Stanford. But Washington should be a really significant favorite here. I don't expect, Taylor to have all of the holes patched in Stanford, even though I think that they could beat this projection that we have for them by a pretty good amount, I think. USC is a team, much like Washington, that has a really, really good offense, and it's all going to depend on what happens with the defense. I think by the time we get to this game, you could be talking about USC as a 3-point favorite here. At home, I don't think that's illogical at all. I think USC is, has a shot to put it, to really turn it on defensively. I think they've got some good talent in place. But it is Grinch's turn to really have to show his chops. He didn't manage to really turn around the Oklahoma defense much. Last season, USC was also very bad at defense again. It didn't seem to show much improvement over the prior year. It's really on Grinch to turn around this defense this season, or else he's got to be gone. But of course, USC, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, I think they have a shot, maybe even more so than Washington, to maybe get closer to that, beta rank score over 2 that we sort of classify as like a big offense, like what Georgia and Tennessee ran out last season. Then we get to a toss-up game at home against Utah. This should be a really fun one. Both of these teams return their quarterbacks. Both of these teams, of course, also return both offensive and defensive coordinators. This should be a really, really fun game. That could come, that again could come very well down to the wire. It's interesting though, because Washington in this season, this year doesn't miss any of the real South powers, gets both Utah and USC on the schedule. And in this case, gets them actually back to back. Utah returns a ton of production off of last year's team. They should be a really, really fun team. I'm excited to see the Utes. The offense probably needs to get a little bit better from where they were last season. And the defense, I mean, Utah is a very solid, doesn't have a lot of holes Pac-12 team, but the defense needs to improve how they defend the pass coming in the next season. They struggled a little bit with that last year, generating pass rush as well. Oregon State, a team that had a legitimately good defense last season, the only legitimately good defense in the Pac-12. Washington is a slight favorite here on the road. That's going to be really interesting to see because, of course, Oregon State, you could argue offensively, has been like a quarterback away under Jonathan Smith. In steps DJ Uiagalelei. I'm pumped to see this Oregon State offense. I think Oregon State might potentially have some upside. They returned both of their coordinators in Trent Bray and Brian Lindgren. Should be a really fun game. If you haven't noticed, I mean, Washington has a real tough stretch from USC, Utah, and Oregon State to finish out the season. And then they get a Washington State team that is still, I think, largely rebuilding, from the bit of the debacle under Rolovich. Offensively, they really, really struggled last season. They've got a new offensive coordinator in. I think that's a really good situation. I think that was a good change to make. New quarterback coming in. I think the Cougars could be better. They need to hold the line defensively, which I think they could potentially do, but Washington should be about a 10-point favorite in this game, if not more, depending on how things are going for the Cougars, even though I do expect them to be better offensively coming in the next season. That's it, man. That's the Huskies. Look, Washington's going to be a significant favorite in a good chunk of the games that we saw, but there are some really tough games on that schedule that are going to be more like toss-ups. For them, and that's going to really make or break the Huskies. But it's also true that the Huskies are going to have an outsized say in the Pac-12 title race this season because they're going to play all the teams that project to be really good in the conference. Now, it may be that, unfortunately for Washington, that leaves them playing spoiler, where because they because they have to knock into everybody that's good, they might take a loss here or there that somebody else would not with a little bit of a more forgiving schedule. Them's the breaks of the schedule. But Washington, if they were able to get through this schedule, I don't think you could really knock them the way you might knock a Pac-12 team that didn't, only played one or two of the really good teams in the conference coming into this year. This Washington team has, and it really will. We are going to figure out everything about this defense when they play Oregon, figure out how well they defend the pass against Bo Nix, who did take some pretty significant steps forward last season. We're going to get to see them against USC trying to defend the pass as well. This Washington team is going to the defense in order for them to win and feel in any way comfortable in some of these games, the defense is going to have to take a step forward off of where they were. Otherwise, it's going to be a nail biter at unexpected times for this Washington team. They turned the ball over once. Offensively, their defense last season was bad enough that they were probably going to give up a bunch of points too, and often did. Like I said, it is all going to depend on the defense taking a step forward this year. So keep an eye on that. And like I said, last year they were really bad defending the pass. It's, we're going to get a good test of that with Oregon. We're going to get another good test of that with USC. Cam Rising, is no slouch throwing the football around. Utah's receivers often leave something to be desired, but the tight ends are phenomenal. Washington's going to have to defend them as well. There's no easy outs for the, and then then they're going to have to face a fun, interesting, and I think one of the, two of the better offensive coordinator head coach one of the better offensive coordinator head coach combos in the Pac-12 in Oregon State. Right. And the Oregon State defense was really good last season under Trent Bray. Anyway, next we have Utah. I'm hopeful to get to the Utes sometime this week. Really excited to keep running through these previews as we get through them. Hit me up with any questions. Let's go ahead and do Again, I'm Rob Bowron, the econometrician, economechicken behind BetaRank. You can find all the stats you saw tonight and a lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. You can find me at BetaRankFB and at Sharp College Football. I will just try to answer questions in a fairly reasonable amount of time, even though Twitter is a hellscape. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12-Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12-Pack Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in.